Greetings and salutations. It's Mike again here from just my camera angle here. Let's move the camera down a little bit. There we go. How's everyone doing? It's Friday night. I'm uh, here at the circus headquarters. Not out partying. I'm middle aged now, so don't go out on Friday nights as much as I used to. I mean, for those of you who are here with me, I thought I would share some thoughts, right, about the week. Did a bunch of stuff this week. Did some content. I've done quite a few interviews, some podcasts. We did Steve Schmidt. Just recorded podcast with Mike Masnick from Tech Dirt. Have a few more interview requests that have kind of come out for some other podcasts, some fun stuff there. So I'll post those as those come out. And I'm doing my own thing here, right? Doing my own little mini show here on Substack Live where I talk about things. So yeah, this has been a big week, right? We had the midterms on Tuesday. Everyone's excited about that. Zohran Mamdani won the mayoral election in New York City. He'll be sworn in as New York's mayor on January 1st of the new year, and everyone's talking about it. Some people are horrified. Some people are very excited. I'm cautiously optimistic, as always. So, anyways, what shall we discuss? So, one piece the piece I put out today, which it recycles, I think, some sort of like arguments I've made across several pieces over the past year around like unitary executive theory and sort of like my view of the Supreme Court and the Federalist Society. And it's something. It's actually something I wrote a lot about like a year ago when I first launched Notes from the Circus. There's quite a bit of focus on unitary executive theory, the deep state conspiracy, a lot of the conversations around sort of legitimacy of the administrative state and the history of civil service protections, like dating back to the Pendleton Act after the assassination of President Garfield. So this has actually kind of like been like a bugbear of mine. It's kind of been difficult. It's like difficult to talk about, but I think it's increasingly more important to talk about now, especially with some of these like cases now that are before the Supreme Court, the tariffs case, about the legitimacy of Trump's tariffs under this 1970s law IEEPA, which reformed like an earlier law as it pertained to sort of the president having emergency powers to regulate foreign commerce. And so there's this legal argument that's before the Supreme Court because the argument is that this legislation that Trump is relying on in order to impose these tariffs doesn't actually mention tariffs as one of the tools, and that lack of specificity raises sort of like interesting constitutional arguments around Congress's sort of enumerated power under Article 1 to regulate trade with foreign nations, as well as to raise taxes, which is an Article 1, not an Article 2 power. And the fact that IEEPA actually sort of like reformed like an earlier, more expansive law. I can't remember the name of that law. And so there's actually a really, really strong legal case, a convincing legal case, one that I think is absolutely correct, that Donald Trump's tariffs are illegal, and that was certainly the findings of the lower courts, and why the Trump administration has appealed this to the Supreme Court. Um, and so there it seems like there's maybe at least a 5-4 majority that's going to rule in that direction, which is good. But we'll see, right? I'm obviously that would be welcome news to like American consumers. It would also be welcome news, I think, and in terms of the balance of power, within our government. But I don't think it like addresses like kind of my core concern that I've come to see. And look, I know this is controversial and it's not necessarily like making me friends to say, but I see the what has become the sort of the modern conservative judicial view to be sort of intellectually fraudulent, like in the main. And I kind of say that as like someone who kind of like bought into like some of these notions in the past, which is like sort of true of like a lot of things I'm talking about lately. I know that as a former sort of like neoliberal shill, people have enjoyed my sort of takedown of neoliberal thinking. As a sort of a former kind of technocratic centrist, people have enjoyed my critiques of technocracy. So this is like a theme for me. A lot of these positions and arguments that I'm making are against sort of positions that I once held in one way or another through various forms of justification. And that's all interesting, right? Like to think about intellectual lineage here. So my general like view, right? Like what I think is the capital T truth. Regardless of like who's right and like whether people know like have like a full picture or not. Like my belief, my coherent belief, that I think is historically informed, is philosophically informed, and I think is coherent and concordant with, I think, if we're having conversations about original intent, right, in constitutional doctrine, like it seems to me, and like just making the sort of the positive case against this, I don't know, like proceduralist sort of pathology that makes up a lot of conservative legal thought today, is that the framers of the Constitution, and I don't see how this is controversial, right? Like they were primarily concerned with the threat. I mean, there are like really like two threats, right? Like the concentration of like unchecked power on one hand, and they were also worried about the power of the mob on the other side. And these were like the kind of, and they and like the framers, that and Madison in particular, right? James Madison, who designed, right, the the three branches of government, had a pretty like sophisticated theory of power, that I think is genuinely relevant today. And I think I also have like a sort of a kind of a a view which which I think would be considered pretty controversial by a lot of people who sort of categorize themselves as classical liberals, that in fact like Franklin Delano Roosevelt was in fact like very much like properly inside the classical liberal tradition. And I already can like kind of like hear the sort of like libertarian types, like the Cato types, like sort of like falling out of their seat that to hear me say that, right? Because, I mean, and actually, this is kind of I would think maybe like a minority view, and I don't care, right? I can have a minority view. I can think most people are wrong about something, and on this matter, I do, and I'm going to tell you why. I think that I think FDR needs to be interpreted properly as a man of the liberal tradition that was encountering a novel emergent problem that had presented itself with sort of the rise of industrialization and post-industrial revolution America, and the sort of the rise of like financialization in the economy and all of these forces that created sort of what he would come to term economic royalism, right? The sort of these economic like actors that had amassed so much power. I mean, I don't think Americans really recognize how corrupt Congress like actually was back then. There were people on like Rockefeller, and there were like congressmen on Rockefeller and Carnegie's like payroll, basically. And FDR, right? Like, he emerges right in this environment, right, of this sort of like crisis of trust, and and he goes up to he goes after the trusts, right? We have the trust busting of the era. And I think I think you have to look at FDR sort of from a very like I think if you historically like situate yourself outside of the sort of the distorting influence of like of sort of Cold War politics, right? This argument between like capitalism and communism, right? Like central planning versus like market-based economies, which is really, I think, right, this what I sort of like very weird sort of like liberal materialism that sort of comes out of a kind of a newish tradition, like the comes out of the sort of the Austrian school and into America. We have the Chicago school. The Milton Friedman's is like associated with that, and I think like there's like a set of like epistemic errors, right, that get made along the way, right? And I think, and I want to be clear, I think a lot of like neoliberals like today, like people who like thinkers, like intellectuals, like acknowledge this, right? Like Francis Fukuyama has sort of like kind of endorsed the idea that we need more social democracy, as an example, right? I kind of say similar things, right? I said I had relatively positive things to say about Zoran Mondani's victory in New York City. So like kind of like what's going on there, right? And I'm writing a piece for Sunday on why I'm a liberal and not a socialist, and how do you sort of like make sense of that? Like, I mean, one thing that like I would say is that like nothing Zoran Mondani is like suggesting that he's going to do in New York City is, at least through my perspective, like small s sort of socialist, like in the traditional sense, right? Because socialism and particularly like Marxism, we want to talk about Marxism, right, and kind of get into its sort of like moral epistemology, like dialectical materialism, historical materialism, and I mean, socialists and Marxists operate with like what I might say, sort of like speaking more philosophically, right, with different moral categories, right? I would say that socialists are in some ways, right, kind kind of like, I mean, my critique of sort of this like hype, like this sort of like materialist strain of like like liberal thought in like the 20th century, which kind of emerges, right, as sort of like a reaction to Marxism and socialism during the Cold War, right, like vis-a-vis the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China, is North Korea, like Vietnam, et cetera, Pol Pot in Cambodia. I mean, like there's sort of like a Ayn Rand is like, I mean, I think should just like be properly seen as sort of like a kind of a crazy reactionary like liberal, like who's like completely like, I mean people will ruffle this like that by me like acknowledging that she's kind of a liberal, but I would say that she's um like all of these philosophical conditions, including liberalism, have crazy offshoots, right? Like socialism certainly does, right? Like, the Marxist tradition, or you've got like Leninism and Trotskyism, like and liberalism's no different, right? Like, neoliberalism is part of the sort of the liberal conversation, and I can sort of, as a sort of a revanchist sort of classical liberal now, like critique that and say like it's crazy. This is went crazy here. We got to like reel this back in. But I think that so the argument, so like the argument, pulling it back, right, to FDR and the New Deal, right, is like one can look at what he did, right, as this like exercise in socialism, right, because people have this sort of weird, it's not weird, I mean, I understand why people have it, right, that like tax and spend, welfare, Obamacare, things like this, these are socialist things, right, because that when the government taxes something to provide a public good, people say that's like a socialist program. And that's like fine, right? Like language evolves, like that's like how people like use the term. But I mean, when we're talking about philosophical traditions, are those things like inherently socialist? The answer is no, they're not really, because the sort of the like core socialist theory, right, is really focused on questions of private property and ownership and sort of like and the structure of economic relations, right? In ways that liberalism is not as focused on those things. So like this is how you kind of get someone like me like to look at what Zoran Mondami's proposing, right? And I'm like, that's fine, right? Like you can have free buses and you can have universal childcare, and you can raise taxes on the rich, right? Like with the I mean the government has taxation power. The federal government has taxation power. It's I mean, obviously this doesn't pertain to the U.S. Constitution because New York City is a creature of New York state law, but New York state law has taxation power too. And so these are just like things that like you're allowed to do, right? Like in our system, you can pass new laws that like change taxes. So like nothing that like Zoran Mondani is saying in terms of his like policy platform strikes me as like inherently socialist, even though like I would concede that like morally speaking and ethically speaking, he comes to those policy proposals through a socialist ethic, right? And he's being pragmatic about the institutional conditions upon like which he's advancing that. But like like in that sort of like frame, like that makes him kind of like non-threatening to me, right? Like as like a classical liberal. I mean, we can have different economic arrangements within a liberal politics, and this is like something that like if we're talking about liberal philosophy, which I am, right? I'm doing a lot of public philosophy. This is like kind of the distinction that I think, like, you know, most people don't understand. Most people who call themselves socialists don't understand this. Conservatives, like, mostly don't understand this. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't like really buy into this notion that um that if you raise taxes to provision public goods, that you're doing socialism. And I don't think FDR was doing socialism when he built the New Deal infrastructure. Anyways, um, that so I mean I'll get into this like in like detail in the piece I'm going to write on Sunday, but that's sort of my verbal explanation as to why I'm actually not a socialist, but am simultaneously not threatened by Zoran Mondani. Hopefully that nuance gets through to people. Anyways, other interesting things we noticed this week, right? Steve Bannon, speaking before. I don't know where was he speaking. Maybe I'll look that up. I don't remember, but he was speaking before a crowd of some kind of like conservative gathering of folks, and he kind of basically said that, like, look, if the Democrats win back control of Congress, like, we're all going to jail. Which, I mean, I find I'm amused by this because I agree with him. I think he and other people are going to jail, especially if we manage to wrestle back control of both the House and the Senate this year, and put it in the hands of some competent leaders, which that's another if too, right? Like, I'm not, as the people should be aware, if you're new to me or you haven't been reading me for a while, I am not a fan of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer continuing in their leadership capacity. But I mean, I think a democratically controlled Congress in both houses should be absolutely on the warpath against the rampant lawbreaking and corruption that's been playing out. I mean, we have corrupt people, like literally, like just like unbound, like, villainy and cretinism, and I don't know what words, whatever adjective you want to ascribe to what we're currently seeing. And I think that, like, we need to haul these people before Congress, public hearings, contempt procedures if necessary, Congress exercising its inherent contempt powers to arrest people if they don't comply, and the executive branch doesn't play along. I think Steve Bannon is right to be afraid. I think Curtis Yarvin is right to start thinking about whether or not he should, like, move out of the United States. Before a new president is sworn in. I think a lot of people, I think, like, the Van Jones types out there, the sort of like more sort of conciliatory people, would suggest that this is sort of like a dangerous, like, way of, like, thinking about politics. I don't think so. I think that this isn't partisan. It's like, if you did the crime, you should do the time, right? Like, these, like most Americans, I think a majority of Americans, like, recognize that that we are witnessing crime in and around the executive branch, and the corruption we're seeing, like the self-dealing, insider trading, like bribes are being paid, violations of the emoluments clause. Like, I mean, this shit's crazy. It's crazy. It's like out of control. Like, I mean, like, we are. I mean, it's not an exaggeration by any stretch of the imagination to say that like we have become like one of the most corrupt countries in the world in just the past like 8 months. Like, I mean, if you go, I mean, that might sound like crazy to a lot of people, but I think if you go and like talk to people in like Europe or in Canada or Japan or anyone looking in, I think that they would think that that's a fucking understatement. Like they see this happening. I mean, they see like these like American oligarchs like paying tribute in the Oval Office and getting like special favors, lawsuits being sort of settled. I mean, Trump like doing a settlement with himself to like give himself like $120 million back and like legal fees. Like, what the fuck are we talking about? This is like out of control corruption. This is insane. So, I mean, when I see Steve Bannon say like, guys, we're all going to go to jail if like we lose power, my response is yes, you are, because you are in fact criming like there's no tomorrow. And I'm glad they understand that. I'm glad that they understand that that they are aware of the law, that they are aware of their crimes, that they're aware of their culpability in it. And my sort of Camusian hope, you know, my revolt against the absurd, right, is that enough people between like now and 2028 are gonna like come to see it that way too. Angry people whose electricity bills are going up to pay for the to pay for the these data centers. Especially like in Virginia, that was like a very like present concern for Virginia voters. That I'm sure played no small part in the landslide election of Abigail Spanberger as the new governor of Virginia. And so, yeah, I think our job, our task, my task, our collective tasks is to make sure Americans understand that. Americans understand exactly why their power is going up and who is doing it. And they fully understand that, what corporations got special favors and special treatments in exchange for, giving Trump gifts and buying Trump coin and whatever the fuck they did, right? And we're going to prosecute that shit. We're going to prosecute it. And there's going to be people out there, these pearl-clutching people, who are going to say that, like, that's divisive. It's completely divisive. It's going to make, like, how are we going to bring this country together under those conditions? I'm like, well, I mean, one thing we should be aligned with as citizens of this country is that none of us should be breaking the fucking law. None of us should do that. And if I don't think having an R beside your name makes it okay to fucking pay a bribe. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a fucking Republican. This is not a matter of political fairness. Like, who thinks this? Who thinks this? I want to talk to them because I don't agree. I'm glad they fear the black and white stripes. I want them to be paralyzed by that fear. We should talk about the Epstein files, right? Should we talk about the Epstein files? Should I just keep going? Tell me, guys, am I coming on too strong? Is this rant too strong? I don't know. I'm just going at it, letting out all my frustration with you right now. Yeah, Epstein. I mean, it's clear that I'm trying not to laugh because it's not funny. Like, it's not, right? It's like it's morally outrageous. Sometimes things are just like so fucking evil and so fucking absurd that, like, my sort of dark comedy kind of comes out, and I start laughing to myself, and maybe that comes off as like not you're not giving the moral seriousness that the matter deserves. But like, but seriously, I mean, like the Epstein drama at this point, like I think there's another report. I haven't read it. I've only seen like a summary of it, that apparently like FBI agents have been like leaking to the press that like it's like way fucking worse than Michael Wolff like suggested. Um and like you have, and it's clear, right? It's clear that that Mike Johnson is keeping Congress closed for like this reason. And like the political situation is fascinating. I mean, we have like Ben Shapiro is now like at war with like Megyn Kelly and others, and MAGA's having a big fight on whether or not Nazis should be allowed in the Republican Party. Basically, obviously Ben Shapiro, being a practicing Jew, is finding himself in the unenviable position of actually saying that like maybe we shouldn't have Nazis in the Republican Party, and then having to discuss cancel culture and free speech sort of in relation to that like position. Like, I mean, Ben, you are partly responsible for finding yourself in this position. I'm sorry. I mean, I feel bad. I'm sorry. But you're also a dishonest fuck, right? That like told the truth about Donald Trump when Ron DeSantis was running in the primary, and then started fucking lying about him again. So like, I mean, I don't know what to say to you, but like, yeah, I mean, it's like it's obvious that this is like the fact that Trump is so afraid of it, the fact that Johnson is keeping the house closed over it. Like this has to be like the most explosive fucking thing, right? Like this is insane. And like you have to imagine it's like gonna come out like one way or the other, like at some point. Like I don't know what's gonna happen, but the votes are there, right? For the discharge petition on the House floor. And like I don't know what Johnson's gonna do, right? Like it seems that like even if he doesn't swear in the Democrat from Arizona, which by the way is unconstitutional as fuck, like that like violates like the Article like 1 of the Constitution like so badly, and is I think is a violation of Johnson's oath of office. I think he should be ejected from Congress for failing to swear her in, quite frankly. Just me. And I mean, it sounds like there might be a few more Republicans in the House that are prepared to jump ship, based on like some of the ruminations. So like, even if like he continues to draw out the swearing in of the Congresswoman, that like they might get the signatures anyways. So I mean, this is heading towards some kind of explosive moment. And I just like, I mean, the things that I worry about, right, is like I think like Trump might start a war with Venezuela, like if he like right when that happens or something. Like, I mean, this is history kind of tells us that this is like what like dictators and spots like this do. And Trump is certainly like a wannabe dictator, although he's certainly he's certainly struggling, right, with the resistance that he's now feeling. But yeah, I mean, this Epstein shit has to be like, I mean, the way they're acting, it's like it's bad. It's gotta be bad. Anyways, what is how's everyone doing? Turning to the chat room. Let's turn to the chat room. See where everyone is. Does everyone have a good week? Everyone have a good week? what are people saying? What are people saying in the chat room? Let me see. Yeah, one thing I should probably mention, right, too, is right, like is the economy, right? We had like a private estimate come out yesterday from a private firm because Trump basically like shut down the BLS for all intents and purposes because he doesn't want to report on inflation or unemployment anymore. He's just like, it's like we will like no one will know what the unemployment rate is if we don't report it, which basically seems to be the Trump administration's policy at this point. But we do have sort of like we have the ADP payrolls report, and there's and there are some like private firms that kind of can go out and calculate this information themselves, and it's like pretty bad, right? It looks like the economy's lost 1 million jobs since the beginning of the year. In one of these private estimates, that's bad, right? And the GDP number is like 97% of it comes from like data center construction, right? From like all growth, like all of the indicators are that like the economy is like slowing down, grocery prices are going up. The scary, right, thing that we have to worry about now is the condition of something called stagflation, right? Where we have an economic downturn and prices go up. That's not normal, by the way, right? Like, I mean, in a normal, healthy market, right? Like in the 2008 financial crisis, prices came down. Like like housing prices fell, right? People's mortgages went underwater. They had to sell their houses for less than they were worth, right? So you had price deflation in 2008, right? As demand contracted, and we're seeing demand contract and prices go up at the same time. That's stagflation. That's bad. That is a really painful set of economic conditions for Americans, and also for sort of the fiscal the fiscal health of the government, right? Because honestly, the fiscal condition of the government, economists talk about this like sort of like we're moving into what economists might call like fiscal dominance, right? Where the deficit, the fiscal conditions of the government are having a larger influence on prices and on real lending rates than inflation rate policy being set by the Federal Reserve. That's like a scary situation, right? Because if that gets away from you, you could have a currency crisis. There's not much you can do other than raise taxes and cut spending if you get trapped in that place of fiscal dominance. I'm not an economist. Someone like Noah Smith or Paul Krugman can do a much better job at walking you through the sort of the theory here. But there's certainly like signs that that we're seeing some signs of early stagflation. That's bad. That's going to make people really angry. It's going to be not a fun economic environment to work in, and it's exacerbated too by the fact that, right, like we're seeing a lot of jobs now. Like it seems like a lot of people said that like AI wasn't costing us jobs, but like we're now starting to see like companies report like that thousands of jobs are being replaced by AI. Self-driving cars are like a big thing. Like we have Waymo here in LA. I mean, I've used it. It's like actually pretty cool. And so like that's just going to happen, right? And something like 10% of like Americans, like across the country, maybe it's like 9%, I don't, a little less than 10%, make their jobs driving a vehicle in some way, like truck drivers, Uber drivers, gig economy like workers. So like nearly like 1 out of 10 Americans are increasingly, like, I think over the next 5 to 10 years, like looking at seeing their jobs go away, and that's happening at a time where the government doesn't really have fiscal tools like available to it because of the fiscal situation. It's coming at a time when like like we're in a trade war, inflationary pressure. I mean, this is like a powder keg, right? We could be looking at something that is as bad, if not worse, than the 2008 financial crisis, in terms of like the economic impact. And I think that that's just a dangerous place for our country to be. So that's something that like we need to worry about, I think. Don't you think? I think so. I worry about that. But I mean, we've remember, like, even as scary as that sounds, uh this country's been through worse. Uh and like and for most of history, it's been worse than it is now. That's cold comfort, right? But it's also like historical perspective, right? As much as these challenges ahead of us are risks, right? They're also opportunities, right? And I think we have an opportunity now, to start building a new politics. I'm trying to do my own like tiny little part. I have a tiny little voice, to try and sort of like reinvigorate, right, I think sort of the more revolutionary spirit of the liberal idea, to re-enchant liberalism and re-enchant the world, right? And remind ourselves, right, that the reason why we do all of these things is because of love, right? And I talk about that, right? Not just like sort of like love is sentiment, right? You see me write this in my essays, and I mean this like really seriously, right? Like what is it? Like why do we have civilization? Why do we build families, right? Like why do we do the things we do? Why am I talking to you right now, right? Love is this motivating force. I say, like, kind of in my more sort of like theoretical discussions, right, of my philosophy, that it's an epistemic force, right? That it's the sort of the belief, right, in that truth is knowable, the contingent understanding that humans are fallible, that knowledge is always provisional, is overcome, right? Is the sort of the uncertainty, the permanent condition of uncertainty that is human existence, right? Is upheld, right, by a love, right, a faith. The truth can be known, right, and that consciousness can touch consciousness, and that's what I hope I did here tonight, right, with this Substack Live. I hope I touched your consciousness. That was what I wanted to do, out of love for for all of us, for humanity, for this great country, America, that we still fight for, that we still believe in, that these sons of bitches in Washington D.C. Are soiling, are dishonoring. But I think we can recover America's honor, and I think these frauds, these criminals, these cheats shall one day face justice underneath this flag, the flag still waving over the land, over the home of the brave and land of the free. Thank you, everyone, on this Friday night, to hear a few of my thoughts. Thank you. and have a great weekend, and look out for that piece I'm going to be putting out on Sunday about why I'm not a socialist. Thanks, everyone.